Hey everybody, we are conscious. I have consciousness. I think you do too. I can tell that I do. I can see this camera, I can look around the room, I can hear things. I am. I think, therefore I am. What's going on with that? How does that come to be? How do we find ourselves sitting here having a conscious experience? Well, let me tell you. There's three components to it, and it's spelled out in Swedenborg's soul-body interaction, which we're going off the fresh New Century Edition translation, just dropped on Swedenborg.com. And it all begins with the all-time classics, spiritual warmth and spiritual light. These two, spiritual warmth and spiritual light, AKA love and wisdom. If we're talking about love, this is spiritual warmth, wisdom is spiritual light. Flow together from God into the human soul, flow through our soul into our mind and its feelings and thoughts, and flow from there into our physical senses, speech, and actions. There's your consciousness schematic. Source of spiritual warmth and spiritual light. That's coming out of God. And it comes into the human soul, which is going to be a battery right now, because although Swedenborg is adamant that the mind has the human form, I don't know if the soul is in that same form. So it's into the soul, and from the soul flows into the mind, AKA the spirit. So God to soul to spirit, and from the spirit into everything in the body, everything familiar. The senses, our conscious operation and interface with the world around us. Love and wisdom to the soul, to the mind, to the body. And that's how it works. That's how Swedenborg said he observed it, but not everybody thinks that this is the case. And there's actually a long history of people going back and forth about how does consciousness work. Swedenborg says the spiritual inflow proposed by polished intellects of the past flows from the soul into the body. If I were to go to polished intellects right now, if I went to the very educated and smart and accomplished people and I said, how does the soul flow into the body? They would say, okay, guy, pat me on the head. There's no soul. It's all the body. I mean, we are in the age of, or at least the mainstream consensus, even though there's a lot of people that believe that there's some kind of spirit. The mainstream consensus is materialism. Materialism. It's somehow, there's enough going on in your brain, there's enough nerves talking to nerves, the atoms are moving around, charges and things are moving, and consciousness emerges from that physical material. That wasn't as much the case. There was some of that, but in Swedenborg's day, there was a lot more of what we would now call dualism. And this is the belief that there's dual things happening. There's a physical world and everything that's happening in the body going parallel, right alongside, a spiritual something where consciousness resides. And so somehow the soul flows into the body. So materialism is, this is all that's happening. Dualism is somehow these two interact. This can send something, flow into this and activate it. But dualism's not enough. The truth is like trialism. Triism? No, there's two I's in a row. That's probably why nobody thinks this way, because you just can't write it in any kind of photogenic way. Because there's not just the physical component and then the spiritual component, which Swedenborg would also say is the soul and the spirit. That's all on the spiritual level. There's also the divine component, not just to existence, but to your consciousness. God is involved in the moment-to-moment existence of your consciousness. Swedenborg says, nevertheless, it is known that all love for doing what is good. Remember before we're talking about spiritual warmth and spiritual light. All the love for doing what is good. That feeling that you can get of, that's the right thing. I want to help this person. I want to make this better. All love for doing what is good, and all truth that leads to wisdom, particularly accuracies that lead us toward the path or the way of spiritual or religious living. The stuff that guides us to the way things really are, flow into us from the Lord. That no trace of love or wisdom comes from us, and that whatever flows in from the Lord flows first of all into the soul, then through the soul into the rational mind, through this into the constituent parts of the body. And if you're not seeing this whole picture, you're not going to get anywhere. You're never going to know what you are. If we investigate spiritual inflow under any other framework than this one we just laid out, it's like damming up the flow of a spring and still expecting a constant stream of water from it. Like, where's that water? Well, you plugged up the system. Or positing the origin of a tree in its roots rather than its seed. Or studying phenomena that are actually secondary without considering their source. Imagine that there were only 3 dimensions. I mean, there's 3 dimensions, but a lot of people will refer to time as the 4th dimension. There's length, width, height, and then time. Imagine that there was only 3, that there was no time, and we didn't have any concept of before, things that came before that led to the current conditions. And so we went out and took a look at a tree. And we're trying to figure out, how does this tree work? How did it get to be a tree? You might look down and say, oh, well, look, there's roots way down in the ground. It probably started there and then built up from there. You wouldn't know that there was a seed, that back in time there was this little thing that had all the instructions for it, and it folded through this wonderful process into the tree you see today. So it is with you. So it is with your consciousness, that God is the acorn of your mind, that the love and wisdom coming from God into the soul, into the mind and the thoughts and feelings, which then affect and enliven the body. That's how consciousness happens. And you're never going to understand your own impulses and the way that you are and what humanity is unless you're looking at all those pieces at once. So if we're going to understand consciousness and how it works in this framework, we have to have a good understanding of the role each of these things plays in us. God, our soul, our spirit/mind, and our body. You might think the soul is life itself. Maybe you have a body that's just material, but the spiritual brings that to life. Actually not. The soul is not life in and of itself. It is a vessel for life from God, who is life in and of itself. And all inflow of life is from God. Instead of saying God, you could say life. In this case, we've lucked into a pretty good metaphor with this battery here, because this thing got the energy put into it at some point. But how about we just mix metaphors? It says here, we're a vessel. Whenever I hear that word, I think of like olden timey, what are you talking about, vessel? A vessel is a container. Your soul is really, really great, but it's not alive. It is a container for life. It is something that can accept and hold life. God is life itself, where life comes from. So what's going on is simply that we are fashioned to be something that can accept. If I pour this on the table, it just runs out, doesn't do nothing. But we can be filled and hold this amazing substance, which is life. And each of us, though we all receive life from God, are different kinds of vessels. So while this one holds water in a certain way, same amount of water will be differently in this. This one is going to accept water very differently as well. The way the flow works is different, but the life itself is the same. So there's a part deep in you that can accept this life at a fundamental level from God. And that's actually a really good trick. It is a miraculous thing that we have anything that can tune into those frequencies. And it actually describes it in the Bible when we received the ability to do that, when we became a vessel. This is the meaning of the statement that Jehovah God breathed into the human's nostrils the breath of lives, and the human was made into a living soul. You just think, oh yeah, that's like sort of when we happened, but there's a particular mechanical thing that went on. Breathing the breath of lives into the nostrils means instilling a perception of what is good and true. We are something that can sense and accept this love and wisdom or goodness and truth that radiates out from God. If you didn't have eyeballs, which are the ability to perceive light, I don't even know if we would by now care or know that light existed. Maybe we would need it for something, but it's because you have this ability to perceive light that you know it's there, and you can actually use it to navigate the room rather than it's just bouncing around and it doesn't affect me. So your soul has a receptor in it for that goodness and that truth that comes out of the Lord. Then too, the Lord says of himself, just as the Father has life in himself, so he has also granted the Son to have life in himself. Life in himself is God. God is life. And the life of the soul is life that is flowing in from God. So we are a pretty sweet receptor for the most important magical substances in the universe. And that is the way in which life itself progresses. This is why, in case you needed another reason, this is why it's important to learn about God and to think about God and to pursue a full and correct and living understanding of God, because God is at the root of everything, including your consciousness, your ability to exist, and all pursuit of what is the soul, what is human life. And you're not going to do nothing without starting looking in that direction. Swedenborg says, given the fact then that all inflow is an inflow of life, that it works through its recipient vessels, that the central or first vessel in us is our soul, it follows that if we are to understand inflow properly, we must start with God and not at some halfway point. If we were to do the latter, our concept of an inflow would be like a carriage without wheels or a ship without sails. Dating yourself, there's a 18th century metaphor there. This is why earlier in this work there was a discussion of the spiritual world's sun, which has Jehovah God as its center, and of the inflow of love and wisdom, of life, therefore, from that source. If you start reading Swedenborg, it will drive you crazy how much he's talking about God is the sun of the spiritual world. God is like the sun, S-U-N, of the spiritual world. He'll talk about love, and he'll talk about wisdom, and over. Why are you doing that? It's because you can't say, I want to just talk about my life and not talk about God. God is your life. I'm not saying that I'm God, but the energy that allows me to live comes out of God as the sun. So it's the fundamental study of all studies is to understand a bit of the nature of the divine. So, okay. You're right, Swedenborg. You can keep talking about the sun. The reason life from God flows into us through our souls, into our minds, that is, into our feelings and thoughts, and flows from these into our physical senses, speech, and action, is that the above are the vessels of life in sequential order. The mind is subject to the soul, and the body is subject to the mind. If you look at neuroscience studies, they're always telling you, you make up a lot of life. Your brain is taking shortcuts and doing all this so that you only see a little percentage of what's actually going on around you, and you fill in the rest. That's why if you're talking, you have all these viral videos of people are talking to someone across the counter, and then when the person's not looking, it duck, and it's this another person that comes up, but the person doesn't notice the change there. It's because what's inside is actually driving what's outside. So this is why you can't look to the world around you, the material world, to make you happy, because ultimately it's God to soul to mind and the thoughts and feelings in there to body. That's the way it flows. That's why we're sitting here trying to do all this work, the work of religion, the work of spirituality, on changing the way that our mind is, changing the way that our mind accepts love and truth from our soul, doing that through repentance, reformation, regeneration, because that's what's driving it. That's what's driving the whole thing. The mind has two kinds of life, one belonging to the will and the other to the understanding. Check that. Maybe I'm a nerd, but I love this next thing. Definitely I'm a nerd, and I love this next thing. The life in our will is the goodness of love, and its offshoots are called feelings. The life in our understanding is the truth that leads to wisdom, and its offshoots are called thoughts. Our mind is alive as a result of our feelings and thoughts. I believe what is being said here is not that, okay, you're saying that God is at the root of my consciousness, so I just had the thought that I should go over there and pick up that cup. That must mean God is thinking of going over there and picking up that cup. I just had a little bit of worry that I left my keys on the counter, and so God must be worrying about his key. It's an inflow into the center that then moves out into particulars of our life. Duh. Let me give you one more. I've been giving you a lot of props, literally, this time. I'm going to give you one more that I think approximates this. Life of our mind has two parts. You have the will that is amazingly attuned to accepting the divine love that comes from God, and then you have the intellect, which is amazingly attuned to accepting the wisdom or truth that comes from God. And the love itself through God into the soul then comes into the middle of this glove, like this part of the glove, which is like your will. And then in there, based on the shape of our individual recipient vessels, our connections to the spiritual world, all kinds of complexity, just like there is in the brain, you have offshoots of that, which, let's say there's a sort of a line here that's our consciousness. You have these feelings that are stemming from your will itself, but we're not always conscious of what's really driving me, what's at the root of all this. But we feel these pieces of it that are called feelings, and they branch out and are attenuated to various specific parts of our life. Same thing with intellect. You have some life from God coming into the core of how you think, how you process, and then from there, we're aware of different insights and thoughts that we have about the world. Swedenborg goes on to finish out this chain of activity with the physical body. However, the life in our body is its senses, words, and actions. This is once the impulse has gotten all the way down into what you do out here in the world we inhabit day to day. It follows from the sequence in which things occur that these come from the soul through the mind. So anybody who's interacting and does something, you know that there's been a long journey that action took from starting in God and then moving through all these layers and became manifest through this person's body. Just on the basis of this sequence, the wise see all this clearly without having to conduct further research. So you're saying that everybody's life comes from God. Everybody's mind and even ultimately body is activated by God. I have a question. Then why are so many people jerks? And why do I struggle to be happy? And why am I a jerk sometimes? And that doesn't seem very God-like. You don't walk around and feel like, well, look at that. That person is so much like God. There's love and wisdom coming out of everybody all the time. It is because along that chain, a lot can happen to disrupt and invert and pervert that flow. Since the human soul is a higher spiritual substance, it receives an inflow directly from God. Everything going on in God is pure and love. By pure, I'm talking about it's loving, it's honest, it's fair, it's everything that is good. Actually, the soul in everyone is good. The soul in everyone is closely connected to the Lord. It wishes well to all. Only pure love and pure truth exist in there. Things can get mucked up down the chain where we get into the mind and where we get into the body. He says, the human mind, though, being a lower spiritual substance, receives an inflow from God indirectly through the spiritual world, while the body, being made of earthly substances we refer to as matter, receives an inflow from God indirectly through the earthly worlds. There are influences along the way based on how we are and also what we experience that can change the way this path goes. We will see below in number 14. You can read on yourself after this video is done if you want. As I said, Swedenborg.com, soul-body interaction /survey, that a love for doing what is good and the truth that lead to wisdom flow into our souls together. That is absolutely united, but that we separate them as they proceed. They become rejoined only in people who allow themselves to be led by the Lord. All the trouble in life is that the goodness that comes out and the truth that goes with it gets separated and twisted. Around here, all human suffering and pain and the inhumanity of people to each other, it's happening in this area. And reformation and regeneration, the work of spiritual growth, of saying, effectively turning around and saying, wait, where did I get off track? Can I learn? Can I figure out how to have it so that I'm a clear channel here? I reunite the love and wisdom that comes out of God. That's the only thing that really matters in life. That is the constant effort of divine providence. So what God is doing in all the sequence of events in your life all the time is reuniting that. Is trying to get it so that what starts as really good can end up really good, and end up really good as you particularly would express it. We are all different kinds of vessels. It's not just, all right, we got this problem, God's great, and we mess things up, so if we just get rid of all this stuff here, then it would just be God. Each of us is this beautiful expression of and participant in and manifester of the love and wisdom. We are the vessel that can receive it. If you weren't you, the part of God that lines up with you could never come out into the world. This is the great gift that each of us can give to the human race. So it's good that we are who we are. It's good that we're doing what we're doing. But if this chain is broken up or twisted up, then the heaven that God wants to put into us and through us to the rest of the human race can't come to be. So if you're ever feeling like, why am I doing all this spiritual growth work? It's because God's love and wisdom themselves are primed to be flowing through you and making you incredibly happy and making you this light and this warmth in the world. That's what we're going for. And it's there. You might seem like it's really buried, but it's right there. We just got to get back in shape, and a lot of good can come through, and that's pretty exciting. Thanks for watching.